As many people know, just in case you're looking at your program, this is Robert Bannon.
Yeah,
That's Avery Kramer. That's Raoul Felter.
But we may switch in the middle of it.
Well, it's a very powerful film, gentlemen. As many people know, this was the film that largely introduced America to a broader cultural experience of custody cases. I guess we should start with Avery on this. The novel that was initially Kramer versus Kramer, is that based on someone you knew? Is it based on what you had been reading? Did you know that you were picking up on a cultural moment that was just different from what we had all experienced about what the legal system does in cases of divorce?
Yes. What actually was going on at the time was I had become a young father. I was home as a freelancer with 2 children who were 5 and 2 when I wrote the novel, which would have been 1976. And you can't separate my wanting to write this novel from the gender politics of the time. I was going to dinner parties and being assailed for being a male chauvinist pig. There was a tremendous amount of rhetoric in the air about the women's movement and what was going on. And I felt, although I agreed politically with what was being said about women in the marketplace, I couldn't square that up with what was going on in my own home life as a father and in the home lives of several men I knew who were also freelance fathers, in a sense, if you can say freelance people who were fathers. And I thought that at that time where there was so much anger, there was a precinct going unreported, and that was the father. So I wanted to put those 2 things together, my having become a father and what I thought was the neutralization, the nullification of the father's role and the anger that was going toward fathers. I was never divorced. That was always a surprise to people. I wasn't writing out of my divorce. I was just writing out of those motives.
This is not the first time this has happened. When we had War of the Roses a few years ago screened, we had Warren Adler, the novelist who wrote that novel, and he too had not been divorced, and people were shocked by that. Robert, so you wrote the screenplay, you adapted this and won an Academy Award for this, for both the adaptation and the direction of this film. First of all, did you think you were making a cultural film that was broader than the art itself? Did you think there was a political statement in there? Do you think that you were intervening into the feminist movement and you were raising these questions of the complexity of the new family of America? Or is this just an interesting film with young actors that wound up becoming unbelievably famous?
3/4 of the way through the film. At the beginning of the film, my son was at that point 11 years old. At the beginning of shooting the film, my son was 11 years old, and my wife and my son and I decided we would go away skiing. I had never skied in my life, but I was willing, but they were both very energetic about it, so I said, okay. So we had this plan. We were going to go to this, we were going to finish shooting the picture, and 3 days later, or a week later, we were going to go away skiing. After a bad day on the picture, I came home and I said, I've completely screwed up this wonderful book. I've completely screwed up this wonderful book. I have ruined the career of a terrific actor. I have made it impossible for a brilliant actress to continue. I have probably not only will this picture be a total failure, but I will probably never work again. Cancel the vacation. We finished shooting the picture. I said, okay, when are we going to go away? And she said, wait a minute. My wife said, wait a minute. You told us that we canceled the vacation. She has never paid attention to me since that day. I think in the doing of nobody, and when you're in the midst of making something, you hope it's good, and you have days you think it's terrific, and you have days when you think it's awful. And you just soldier on. I think certainly if you're a trial lawyer, you must have those days when you're a trial lawyer. We think, High Committee screwed it up, and they're going to hang my client tomorrow. But somehow there's a larger thing that was going on that was, I think it would have been extremely difficult not to make a good movie from this extraordinary book. Okay, and I think the choice of Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep was exactly the right choice. I cannot imagine two people who would have been more well suited for those particular roles. And on top of that, this kid, Justin Henry, was an incredible, sometimes you just get gifts handed to you without deserving. They just get handed to you, and we got incredibly lucky on that picture.
So Raoul, take us back to the 1970s as a divorce lawyer handling custody cases. How rare a case was this when obviously these gentlemen picked up on something that was taking place in the legal system, and there was a story in this? But this particular type of story, with these particular facts, how rare was this?
Well, there's been a sea change in the law since then. In those days, you would pretty much have to show the mother was unfit to get custody. Now, it's no longer the case. All over America, the only test is best interest of the child. Having said that, as I indicated before, the ghost of every judge's mother walks the courthouse corridors. So children, particularly young children, go with mothers. Now, you go to any lawyer in New York, he'll say, I'm full of beans. That's not the case. But the fact is that's not the case directly under the law, but that's what happens in the courtroom. So this was an interesting case. Actually, I have to say, when I saw the film, the second time I've seen it, I could not understand how Dustin Hoffman lost. Some of it,
even for the mid-70s.
even for the mid-70s, I thought that there was a very compelling case. The cross-examination was, good, but I would have done it a little differently. And the point being that I would have said, for instance, if you want to carry it forward.
Okay, I'll play Dustin.
Okay, when you got married, you said forever and for better and worse, now and forever. Forever was 8 years. Now, it didn't work out. Now, how do you know you're not going to damage this kid again, and you'll walk out again, and you're going to say, well, I know, but you knew when you got married it was forever and not forever. The other thing is, I would have questioned her carefully about this lover, because it may be a very fertile field. He may be the neighborhood drug dealer. You know nothing about it. You had a judge who wasn't taking notes, very unusual. You had lawyers who weren't taking notes, they were great actors, but they were, just an aside, I was once asked to read for a role, a female director, Susan Seilberg. Is that her name, Seilberg? And I was terrible. I didn't act like a lawyer. And when I saw the final movie, they hired an actor, and he acted like a lawyer. So there's a moral there somewhere.
Bob,
Yeah.
Bob Balaban sat in this chair yesterday. He said the same thing. He said he's played a lawyer many times, but he doesn't ask lawyers anything. He just goes and pretends to be one.
Now, I have to say something about this 6 degrees of separation. When I was writing the screenplay with Kramer, I got them to give me an office on the second floor of what was in the Columbia building.
I was in the Columbia
I was
Pictures
right
building.
down the hall from you. I passed you every single day that I was working on that screenplay, and I never had the nerve to go in and ask you about that.
And it's a good thing.
It's a very good thing.
There was.
He was ready to be hired. You could have cast him. He was like, yeah,
I was.
Trust me.
He's
I
absolutely
actually would have
right.
hired you for the job.
I was on the second floor, and at one point, Robert, what's his name? The wonderful actor who just died. Not Robert Redford, the other guy in the movie.
The who?
Paul Newman, you're talking?
Paul Newman
Oh,
was in
right.
the building for a short period of time. It was a very interesting building. And I used to go in sometimes, there was a freight elevator, if you remember, on 55th Street.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the guy was always there with a car, and you just walk in, it takes you up. But it's a freight elevator. And one day I'm standing there, and I look next to me, and it's Paul Newman. And I didn't know what to say, so waiting for the elevator now, I said, you know, you made a lot of problems in my life, Mr. Newman. And he said, I made problems for you? I said, yeah. People always mistook me for you. And he got a kick out of that. But it was an unusual building, and we always used to get fires or smoke from Cote Bosque, who was, I was directly
Cote
under
Bosque.
Cote Bosque. And,
So Avery, Robert, well, first of all, let me ask you, Avery, I apologize, I can't say that I remember having read the novel. Is the ending the same in Kramer versus Kramer, the novel?
It is.
Okay, so Robert, you took the novel, which you knew was a masterpiece, and you gave it what we know is a Hollywood ending, right?
No, it
do-
was the ending that
No, I know,
Avery
but
wrote.
it also is, it happens to be coincidental. It has a really great Hollywood ending, right? Raoul says, you know, I can't believe he lost. Now I'm saying, did you consider changing the ending and saying, you know what, Avery, let's see if we can work this out. I'm going to make this different. It may not, the studio may like this, but I want to give it an ending that's more authentic.
At some point,
Now, what I mean by authentic, I'm sorry, just to be clear, is that, and I suspect Raoul is shaking his head, he knows, is that, do you know any mothers that having one custody would have just given the child right back?
let me say this, with all due respect to everybody in the audience.
Who are
This
not
is
lawyers, I always...
Whatever, but-
Right, I'm saying,
But this is not a movie about the law. This is a movie about forgiveness. This is a movie about love and about somebody finding the center of his life that he had not paid attention to. It is not about a man being successful. It is not about winning or losing a law case. It is about, and forgive me because I'm saying something that I believe you could probably say much better than I can.
but you're doing beautiful.
But it is about mercy, and it's about someone. It is about love that's not romantic love, that's empathy. That in the end, that tear that happens in the beginning of this picture is mended. That they have become a family again, not a conventional family, not a family they'll never get back together. When we shot the film, the ending was the same. There were things that we needed to fix in the last scene. But one of the things that we did fix, in the first time we shot it, in the last scene, they got in the elevator together and went upstairs. Everybody thought they were going to get back together, and we didn't want them to think that. That would have been against what I believe the novel meant, and so we reshot it so that he stayed outside and she went up by herself. And because it was in that sense, it could not be that Hollywood ending of a conventional love in that way. It was about and I'm really, I mean, that sense that family healed itself through sitting in the courtroom is not about who wins and who loses. The courtroom, from my point of view, is about these two people have to sit there and listen to one another and pay attention to one another for the first time. And the only way they could do it was in a courtroom. It isn't about the verdict. It isn't about who did what right. It is about it's about them listening to one another. And I think that's what it's not the law, it's about mercy.
It's a great answer, actually, because you set that up so nicely in that earlier scene when he's walking in the snow with the Jane Alexander character. It's like a little misdirection. She's getting back with her husband, and yet you don't do that for us at the end. That this is sort of another cultural moment that it identifies the new look American family. That this is in fact a family that will not be together, that will still be a unit of some kind.
Yes, that you can get divorced, but you can never get unmarried. You just can't. Once you're married, it may work out or it may not, but you can never get unmarried. That woman is never not going to be your wife. She may not live with you, and she may be married to one or two other people at the time, and you be married to someone, but she's always going to be your wife, and you're always going to be your husband. In some sense, there is, however ill-founded it might have been, there is some kind of family there. It's not a conventional family, but it exists. It doesn't go away.
So, Raul, I just want to know, how come this is such an unusual divorce case? Because, okay, there's a custody battle, but they're not even fighting over the apartment, no vases, no money, high school yearbooks. What's with these people? This is not the conventional divorce. This seems now, is it normal that it would be so bifurcated that you'd have just the kid and we don't fight about cash?
I think a more cogent answer is that the direction is so brilliant, you don't think about that even until you would bring it up. Your focus is completely upon what's happening. And by the way, the things with the elevator I thought were brilliant too, because it's all through the movie.
Right.
Courthouse, elevator goes, the one party going down. It's a wonderful metaphor for what goes on in people's lives, closing the elevator door and the elevator going down. But yeah, back in the real world, it's like Annabelle Lee. Money, love is love. He loved with a love that was more than love. Money is more than money, and it permeates all divorce cases to some degree. The other thing is, it was very interesting. I listened as he was talking. I watch sometimes in divorce cases. It's a painful experience to see the other spouse being talked about themselves. And it must be something similar that happens on a psychiatrist's couch. It's pain that I see when it's played over.
Avery, Robert, the reaction, I know the film did astonishingly well. It won 5 Academy Awards and no doubt sold many more novels for Avery. But the reaction to the story, did it launch a movement? Did you receive letters from fathers groups? I mean, it seemed to have captured a time. What was its after effect? Today, we just take for granted that these cases happen every day, right? This is how often Raul spells.
You must have run into that a lot.
What actually, tell us what...
Raul and I were talking about that earlier. Your words, it caused a sea change on several levels. The first and most obvious is after Kramer versus Kramer, and this was its life. It was published in hardcover. There was a paperback version prior to the release of the movie. There was the movie, and then as they do, a tie-in version paperback with pictures of the...
I have that book, so
yeah,
let's
so
not dismiss
all that. After all of that shook out and all of the Academy Awards were won, the most obvious thing happened was that more men began to go into court and ask for custody. So you had more men asking for custody. But the sub rosa thing of it all was that in those divorces in which there was no custody battle, you had more men asking for better visitation rights than might normally have been asked, because they, in effect, were given permission by this story to be more active fathers. And the good side of all of that rhetoric from the women's movement is that more women were willing to have that happen. It was, after all, what they were asking for, more participation by men. So you had a change in the visitation rights, you had a change in the custody proceedings, and you had basically a cultural element happen that hadn't happened before. And as I was talking to Raoul, I had a family court judge said that Kramer versus Kramer was being cited in proceedings as though it was law. It was a movie. So you saw all of that. We've been talking about, and I was telling Robert about this, a stage version of it, and somebody brought up, well, do you want to set it in the late 1970s, or do you want to do it for today? And I said in the room, you can't do it today.
Yeah.
If you did it today, he would win. And why would he win? Because of Kramer versus Kramer.
But Raoul, I mean, I love that, and I loved how eloquently Avery said it, but is that true? You said, no, I just want to take us back. You said you were surprised he lost then.
Yes.
Right, even then. And Avery's saying, well, if today, right, you're saying there's no way he would have lost. Is that true? Because I can tell you that, you know, I communicated, I don't know if there's any people from Fathers and Families, they're an advocacy group, and they sent out a notice to the metropolitan area, you know, an APB. You should come, you'll hear these guys, it's an iconic film. But I think they said in the email, but don't be disappointed, you know, meaning that this is about a loss. You lose these things and it doesn't change. Fathers think they lose these things.
Well, let me rewind a moment, because the last thing that Avery said, I think, is profound. Before Kramer versus Kramer, out of hundreds of cases, I never had a mother come in and say, I want to give up my child, I want to lead a life for myself. I never had one. Afterwards, women were coming in. It was socially acceptable on some level. There's a precedent on some level. And women did come in and say, you know, I want to lead a life for myself. I'm hamstrung by the child. Or I think the child might be better off with the father. And you see that very frequently today. The other problem with the law is that these cases are decided by a judge, and you could have 3 judges in this corridor, and each one will decide the same case differently.
Yeah, but that means that there's a 50-50 or so. There's a towing cost.
No, not a towing cost, but there are nuances to all these cases.
Okay, but the point is it true what Avery says, that in fact if you went today under these facts, Ted would win?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I don't think there's any question.
He doesn't have to show that there's any incompetence other than that she left him for a year and a half?
Yeah, but you're saying this person is a fine person, except he's a fascist. I mean, the fact is that this is imagine this little kid, the mother just walks out, and you're going to put this kid in danger again? The mother may pick up and walk out again on the child. How many assaults could a little boy have? That would have bothered me if I was a judge. I don't think I'd be willing to gamble the child on the mother's finding herself through analysis or whatever her problem was. No, I think I would go to a safe haven and say the child's happy now, and some security, and give the mother lots of visitation or whatever. And it was a movie. It was a movie. Everybody said it's about love and loss. And about a death, basically. All these divorce cases are about a death. A marriage has died. Sometimes you're just interring a dead marriage, and sometimes you're making the patient realize they died. But there's a sadness about it, and lost in all this viciousness in court, destroying. You'd be surprised how many people come to a divorce lawyer and say, I want to shut her down. I want to destroy her. Women are worse than men because they're more bloodthirsty than men. And they're even worse.
That's a fact, right? No?
Well, a soldier once told me that he was an observer during one of the Israeli wars, and he said the Arabs were more afraid of the Israeli female soldiers than they were the male soldiers. The female soldiers were ruthless. And of course, there could be lots of arguments, and we're going to straight. But it's obviously a very powerful film, and it's one of the few films that changes a subculture, changes people's lives.
You know, I don't get a chance to say this, and Robert Benton and I have known each other for a very long time. People would always ask me, so what did you think of the movie? Which I always thought, did you like it? which I always thought was like the most absurd question. There are a handful, there have been many, many novels that have been adapted for movies. And please don't take out of this that I'm giving any credit to the novel, because I'm not. There are a handful of adaptations in movie history. The Godfather, The Grapes of Wrath, To Kill a Mockingbird, just to name those. And Kramer versus Kramer, they're all based on novels, and they're all beautiful jobs by the directors. And Robert Benton is up there with those movies in both writing and directing this movie. It's just, it was a gift to my life. And I get a chance now to thank him for that.
Very sweetly said. Okay, but
Look,
You don't have to.
no, I do in this case, because sitting there from, I think, early September to sometime in early December, down the hall from you, working on that novel, working on the screenplay of that novel, it was, of all things that I've ever done, and I've been very privileged to have worked on some really interesting novels, but it was written as a film, and mean that in the best sense of the word. There's a cinematic architecture to it. I don't mean that there were shots of this and there was that, and I don't mean that in any corny way, but that there is a flow in that novel that made it so easily adapted into a screenplay, and for all of us, for Dustin and for Stanley, for Avery and for me, we brought, for Dustin, for Stanley, for Avery, for me, we brought to this our own life. This is a lot about what it is to be a father. A lot of this movie is about the healing of a rupture in a kind of mini death in people's lives, as Ralph said. But in that sense, it is, the glue of it is that relationship between a father and a son, between a parent and a child, which I think is and what Avery wrote. And it made that, not corny, made it heartbreaking and believable and never slipped into sentimentality. And that's what made it so effortless to do.
I'm wondering, let's talk about the sea change idea, and then I'm going to take one question from me, and then we'll take some from the audience. I'm interested in the sea change idea because I thought that you might say something else. Yes, we know it took a sea change in one direction, but I would think that it would have frightened the mother movement as much as it empowered the feminists who would say, look, you know, gender roles change. In order for women to become mobile in the workplace, we need fathers to become mobile in the house. But women who were not feminists may have been threatened by this film because it introduced an idea that before this time people couldn't imagine, that a guy who couldn't make French toast eventually made French toast. And he actually turns out to be a great father. And that the premise, the presumption that women are just better at it was revealed through a novel and through an Academy Award-winning film, that in fact, you know, men can do this sort of thing too. And I'm just wondering whether you heard...
It wasn't about that. It wasn't about that men could do it. It was about this one guy with this one kid. It's what it's like to be it's what it's like to be a parent. At some moment, I'll tell you a humiliating story. Early on, I had adapted the courtroom scene of Avery's, and it was lovely, and I had adapted it in my own way, and And after working with Meryl for like 3 or 4 days, I had a sense that she knew something. And I said to her, take this and rewrite this speech. I want the points to be the points that are made, but I think it's a man's voice. I think it needs to be a woman's voice. And I went off and I completely forgot that I said that. Not a very smart thing to do. X number of weeks later, we're in the courtroom scene. Meryl comes in and she said, here, I've rewritten this speech. And oh God, I've completely screwed up. I'm going to lose the day of shooting. I'm going to lose the confidence of an actor. It's going to be awful. She gives me these pages, and it's too long. And it's substantially the scene that but there are some differences. For instance, she's the one who says, I'm his mommy, I'm his mommy. Mommy is never a word a man would have chosen. And it needed a woman to say that. It needed that thing, that specificity that Meryl gave it to make what Avery did and I translated that much truer.
Let's take some questions from the audience. We've got Media and Entertainment Law Society people wearing nice shirts. And you'll take, there he goes. And we have working microphones.
Thank you. I heard Gloria Steinem once speak, and she said that women would not be liberated until they shared the kitchen. So I don't think that men being more active in the home was really a threat to the women's movement. Based on that.
Say that last
No,
part.
I didn't
You
say the
don't
women's
think-
movement. I said the mother movement. I never
That
said the
women
women's-
would not be liberated until they're able to share the kitchen. They have to be able to let the men come into the kitchen, and then the women will become liberated.
Yeah, no, she's not asking a question. She's just
Yeah,
responding
but
to
I
the-
do want to ask a
Oh,
question
okay,
from
good.
the lawyer.
His questions are good.
Okay, so I,
Can I say one thing about Gloria Steinem? I was on a panel with Gloria Steinem, Judy Collins, and another lady. And Gloria Steinem got very angry at me and said, if I were your wife, I would kill you. That's actually true. And I answered her, which my wife always reminds me, I said, you wouldn't have to, I'd kill myself.
All right.
in the movie, they said that.
I'd like to leave Gloria Steinem out of
Okay,
this
fine.
conversation.
No, in the
She's a
movie
friend of
you
mine,
said
and
that-
I don't want to get into that
Okay,
conversation.
the court scene gave the opportunity for the two parties to really talk to each other. So I was wondering whether you believe in mediation as before going to court, as trying to way to communicate and solve the issue of a divorce.
Okay, first I'll tell you, my own observation is that it's rare in court that they look at each other. It adds an unbearable burden on some level to them. I guess they look at each other. Mediation, now to talk directly to your question, is an awfully seductive process. We avoid the lawyers, we don't pay the lawyers, and we talk to it, we act civilized and so forth. Wonderful, except it doesn't work. And it's not just because I'm a member of the lawyers union, if there is such a thing, but it just doesn't work. The issues are too complex usually. Mediation seems to work, from our observation, if there's clear parameters around it. You want to work out a visitation schedule. You want to know what to do with not dishes, but beloved items that they may share. If you circumspect it. Otherwise, mediation really doesn't work. The more powerful person dominates the mediation, and sometimes you get locked into, no, everybody's bored by this, I suppose, only lawyers would be interested. You get locked into some template, and then it's very difficult to unwind from that. So I'm not a great fan of it, but in certain areas it's great.
I just want to jump in. This movie was made in 1979.
Yeah, good point. They didn't.
There was no mediation
Yeah, no,
as a
it's
factor. People have said after the fact this was a perfect case for joint custody. Joint custody was not a concept that was in the world. You must keep the context of this movie. 1979, none of these 2011 thoughts were in the air.
You know, if I may just add one thing, it should not go unsaid. when I saw this movie, those of us who were alive in those times, it reminded me, it captured so well the neuroticness of the times, the superficiality, it's this ad culture. I thought it was wonderful in terms of the architecture all around the major story, and really, I thought it was great. I felt I was back in time, because none of you lived then, though.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was interested in what you
Closer.
said, and I agree that it was a movie about mercy and forgiveness and all those things. But did anybody have the feeling that maybe she was going to change her mind again? Because I did. I had the
You
You
feeling.
mean he shouldn't have left her in the elevator alone?
Yeah, no, not that, but just that this woman didn't just go off and get healed in 11 months or however many months she was away.
Well, I think we don't normally talk about this, but Avery and I had conversations once about a sequel called Joanna Kramer's Serial Killer.
Yeah, was it Merrill or Dustin said, let's do a sequel and kill the kid? Was that the conversation?
Yeah.
Right.
I think one of the thoughts I had there is that if there was a sequel, Kramer versus Kramer, and now Billy got divorced, right? Because he is a child of divorce. And it's an interesting, I mean, how most people in this room, I probably, unfortunately, to some degree, have families of divorce in them, and it's just part of our culture, and it would have been another phase of this. Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question? Can I have a show of hands of how many people in this room are either divorced or from families that are divorced? That's not a big proportion.
It's about
That's
almost
pretty
half.
good. You guys are,
I have to jump in with a favorite story in my family. There was a woman who was a friend of my wife, and this woman said to this friend of my wife, "How is she doing with his son?" And this friend said, "Well, first of all, they're her sons too, and second, they have two of them." It was incomprehensible that this was a work of fiction. Well, it was a work of fiction.
Sir?
I wanted to say, I've seen the movie over 25 times. I don't think any movie, I don't think only Al Jolson singing Sonny Boy could bring out more emotion than that movie. I just thought the relationship between the boy and the father in so many ways was just unbelievable. It was so realistic. And to me, it was about loss and love. He was going to lose his son. He got his son. I mean, it was just, I think he hit the nose right on the head. I was curious, how was it to work with Stanley Jaffe?
how what?
How was it to work with Stanley Jaffe?
Stanley is a dear friend. This is the second time we worked together. He gave me my chance to direct the first time. I think, and I was saying to Avery before, if Avery is the foundation on which this picture is built, and Dustin is one of the major pillars, as is Meryl, so is Stanley. Stanley brought to this the experience of going through a divorce, of deeply loving his children. It was a movie that he was passionately attached to. I think his passion for the picture was as great, if not greater, than any of Dustin's or mine or Avery's, because it was from his gut.
Over there. Last question.
Speaking on the relationships that are in the film, is there anything that you did for the actors to build those relationships, or like before, did you have them spend any time together as a family to build those things? Because the relationships just seem so well formed.
No, I think Dustin coming into this picture knew the character. We sat, Dustin and Stanley and I sat in a hotel room for 10 days, going through the script in scene by scene, line by line. And Stanley held us to the thing. And I taped, Dustin's a great improviser. And I've always felt I can see the line between improvisation and script. So I taped everything. And I went back and I just listened to Dustin's voice rhythms. And I wrote, I'm a good mimic as a writer. And I mimicked Dustin's language pattern. So that when he improvised, it would be seamless. Because it should give him freedom. The actors, it's so emotional. The actors can't be held on a short leash. Now, what I didn't understand is Meryl can do anything, anytime, anywhere. Whatever there is to do, she can do it and do it flawlessly. Flawlessly. I think that there were times I looked at her and I thought, I love her, but I'm really scared of her. She is that good that I've never seen anybody better. I've seen other people as good, but never anybody better.
Did she go on to do other things?
She did a couple of other pictures.
Okay.
She did a couple of other pictures.
So the film festival continues tomorrow night. It closes. We'll have a reception afterward. Will be Fritz Lang's M. No, hold it. Just relax. Remember, we have a raffle. You get books today, and our guests are Henry Bean and Larry Gross and Sarah Williams Goldhagen. We want to thank our really great and distinguished guests, Robert Benton, Avery Corman, Raoul Felder. Also, since we are in the presence of Robert Benton, multiple-time Academy Award-winning director, I want to remind everyone that next year when we do the Forum Film Festival, we're actually going to be also showcasing short 15-minute films. We've sent out announcements. You love this idea. All around the country, all the film schools have been given an announcement that next year's film festival, we're going to do a competition on 50 short films on a legal theme in any genre. So it's the Forum Short Film Competition, okay. And we're going to judge that, and you'll be able to see them early at 6:15 or 6:30 before we start our films. So, oh yeah, and our producer, Aaron, pick one. See, this is our first winner, set of books. We have what we're called the divorce. You know what I was actually thinking? Whoa. You know, there was that one scene where he says, "You little shit," right? And I couldn't help but think, yes, I couldn't help but think that Alec Baldwin, who has been a guest of the Forum, and we have his memoir. And the reason I say that is because Alec Baldwin actually said something on 60 Minutes when he was interviewed by Morley Safer. And I was very struck by the line that's in the novel and that was adapted by Robert Benton. You may recall that he said some unfortunate things to his daughter. And then when he was interviewed on 60 Minutes, he said to Morley Safer, who in my opinion must be a shitty father, he said to Morley Safer, "You mean to tell me you've never actually, in the heat of anger, said anything to your child, anything ever?" And Morley Safer looked at him like he was like on crack. He said, "Of course, I would never say that." Now, Raoul knows how absurd that is. Anyone who's a human being, sorry, Mr. Safer, anyone who's a human being knows that there's horrendous things. And I wonder they would have said, "You little shit," was not used as evidence against him. Because I remember Alec Baldwin telling me one day, I'm sorry, this is a plug for Alec Baldwin, he said, he's had friends who said to him, "God, it's not the worst thing I've ever said to my kid." And people say things, and it doesn't necessarily make them bad fathers. Okay, Aaron, who's got this one? This is ticket number 950-6737. Oh, you got to go back, 950-6737. This one is now being called the divorce package. It's got Raoul Felder, all signed, Alec Baldwin, and Warren Adler's The War of the Roses. Who's got that? Bingo? Good call. Look at you. Congratulations. Well done. Yes. And this is, we also have another War of the Roses, but we also have Christopher Buckley. These are all signed. And Lorenzo Carcaterra. These are novels. And this goes to 950-6739. So bingo. 950-6739. Sorry, oh, is that you? 950-6739. Good, excellent, well done. Bruce, you want to hand this over? All right, let's say goodbye to our friends. Thank you, gentlemen.